Our next speaker is going to be Professor Will Waters, who holds the National Endowment for Humanities Distinguished Teaching Professorship at Boston University. Wow. He teaches courses in German literature of the 19th and 20th centuries, advanced German language, comparative literature, translation, and also the humanities sequence of BU's core curriculum. His research interests center on poetry and poetics. He is author of Poetry's Touch on Lyric Address, what he's going to be speaking a bit about tonight, I believe, and numerous scholarly articles on topics in German and comparative literature. At BU, he has been awarded both the Outstanding Teaching Award from the Honors Program at the College of Arts and Sciences and the Templeton Prize for Excellence in Student Advising. So please help me to welcome Professor Waters.
Thank you very much. One of my favorite TV shows ever was an episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation called The Inner Light. The Starship Enterprise comes across an unknown space probe that aims an energy beam at Captain Jean-Luc Picard, who falls unconscious. He wakes to find himself on an unknown planet called Catan, where his name is actually Cayman. He learns he's always lived on that planet. He's married and has friends there. And he's just woken up from a fever in which he suffered delusional dreams of being a starship captain named Picard. And then the episode seems to ditch all the rules that govern 50-minute network TV. Picard, or Cayman, goes on to live out a long and full life on the planet as we see the decades pass. He has children. He raises his family amidst his community. He slowly grows old. He plays with his grandchildren. And along the way, he practices his trade, conducts scientific studies, learns to play the flute. His beloved wife finally dies. And those strange dreams about being a starship captain fade away, are all but forgotten. The whole thing is deeply satisfying to watch, and Patrick Stewart's performance gives us, in a wonderfully compressed form, the sense of a fulfilled long life surrounded by good and loving people. Now, periodically, there are cuts back to the Starship Enterprise, where we see that Captain Picard is there, still unconscious, apparently only a few minutes after he was hit by the energy beam. Meanwhile, the crew has traced the origin of the rocket probe. It comes from a system far away whose sun had gone nova 1,000 years before, destroying all life on its planets. So in the end, it's revealed that 1,000 years ago, the people of that planet, Catan, learned that radiation from their sun was rapidly increasing and that they were doomed, and so was all life on their planet, and they could not escape. But they created a space vessel that would carry memories of their civilization out into space in the hopes of finding someone to whom those memories could be transmitted. In other words, Picard's long life as Cayman, his marriage, his craft, his art, his children, his grandchildren, the slow aging of his body, and the loss of his dear wife, like the whole world in which this life were lived out, that was all a vision, an inner experience planted in him, if you like, by the space probe. And in reality, it occupied less than half an hour of his time on the Enterprise. All those people, that whole culture, the whole planet, died 10 centuries before, leaving no trace, except now, in the heart of one human being. I find this story absurdly moving, and so did the TV audience, which voted it one of the best episodes ever in a viewer's choice poll. And the episode won a Hugo Award, which was the first time, for excellence in science fiction, the first time a TV program had won a Hugo Award in 25 years. What is it in this story that's so touching? The people of Catan launch a rocket. So your hope, if you send out such a vessel, is that someday it might show one person that once the universe contained you and your world. But that's not quite it either. This beam doesn't transmit facts. It's not a message, that this world existed. A whole life is what Picard lived as Cayman. It's not information about the existence of a vanished world. The vessel touches the feeling of a world and a life. If you made such a vessel, you made it to convey things that can't be put in statements or databases. What it feels like to know the people you know, to love the people you love, to be hurt by the ones you're hurt by. What it feels like to come to awareness in the specific culture that you have your being in, to find yourself bodily in the natural world that surrounds you and make your path through it. But as you may be thinking, this isn't so different from the situation of any of us. we live our lives. We're known in some part to those around us, and in some part we're opaque to them and also to ourselves. And life is all the inexpressible things that life is, and then we die. And what could we say to sum it up? What's the one message we'd transmit to others, if we could, to say everything that being alive has meant to us? I think what we most wish others could know is what being here has felt like. The taste, the ache of being alive in our shared world as oneself and not someone else. It's not information that's the precious thing, it's experience. And if there were only some technology or some vessel that could transmit it. Well, there is actually a vessel that can do this. It's called literature, or art, or music. And from the earliest times, the arts have expressed things that are not paraphrasable. People have found in art ways to say things that they couldn't say in any other way, things that mattered deeply to them. Now, clearly, not all works of art are made with the thought of reaching into the future, but most are made with the hope of reaching people one doesn't know, and so conveying something of oneself, at least through the dark reaches of interpersonal space. Since time is short, the rest of my comments will be about the realm I know best, which is literature. And as Marilyn Monroe once said she did, we will read poetry to save time. First slide, please. There we go. So can a thing be made that becomes a kind of open door through time? I'm going to show you a poem that's interested in exactly this question. It's by Emily Dickinson. Essential oils are wrung. The attar from the rose be not expressed by suns alone. It is the gift of screws. The general rose decay, but this, in lady's drawer, make summer, when the lady lie in ceaseless rosemary. I should say one of Dickinson's odd habits was to put verbs in the infinitive form. So in that third line, be not expressed means is not expressed, and make summer when the lady lie means makes summer when the lady lies. The poem starts by pointing out something about the precious attar of roses, or rose oil. Many pounds of rose petals are required and have to be put through a very labor-intensive process to make just a few drops of rose oil. So it's always been a rare, precious luxury. Here we're told that such essential oils have to be wrung out of their source. Sunlight will make roses grow, but line 3 reminds us that sunlight will never produce the essence of the rose, namely attar. You have to apply force and artifice to nature. Line 4 calls this twisting screws on it in order to find the essential oil. Essential. In most contexts, we think that essence and nature should go together. Certainly in advertising they do. If you've got a shampoo called Herbal Essences, they don't want you to think about how much force and artifice has been necessary to process those herbs, if there are even any herbs in it. But clearly Dickinson is right. Essence is, on the one hand, essence. It's fundamental identity of the thing. But paradoxically, that's not something that already exists. Essence has to be wrung. And if you're thinking that ringing and screws sound a little bit violent, you're right. The process seems to be destructive as well as difficult. The second stanza shows the payoff. Roses in general, called the general rose here, will fade and die quickly, but an essential oil produced by those painful screws not only outlasts roses in nature, it outlasts even the lady who purchased the attar. When she lies in ceaseless rosemary means when she's dead. Rosemary is associated with remembrance. So when she's gone, the attar is still doing its thing. I said it outlasts roses, but that's actually much too pale a word for what Dickinson is claiming the attar does. Even though it wasn't expressed by suns, the attar seems charged with the luminary force of the sun itself, of all the days of sunshine, when we're told that it makes summer. This is this amazing moment in the poem. You have to take those words seriously. The essential oil makes summer. In other words, it calls back, but also calls indoors, not only the original roses, but somehow the whole summer world, the whole full season of their bloom. And the poem says it does this even after the attar has been locked away in lady's drawer for decades. Obviously, Dickinson's interest isn't just perfumes. This can't help being also a poem about the human effort to distill something precious or essential from our lives. Life is unspeakably beautiful, and it also has worms and mold and children who pull off your petals for no reason at all, and then you turn brown and die. But maybe there is some essence of what makes your life feel precious. Maybe there's something that concentrates your feeling of what it is to be alive so that people can really breathe it in. People can know it and maybe even experience summer long after you're gone. Your summer is ended. Is there such a thing? Dickinson's answer is actually not yet. You have to design and build your own space probe from the ground up. And it's going to cost you a ton of labor, and it's going to hurt. But it might be the most meaningful thing you could ever do. The poem isn't stopping there. You may be thinking that the word "this" in line 6, as I'm thinking, could have another meaning. I've been talking about this as meaning the attar, which is contrasted with the roses in general. Right? The general rose decay, but this makes summer. But the word "this" could also be read as a word pointing to itself. It could designate this poem, but this makes summer. And that's plausible because poets naturally have writing poetry on their minds. And poems are short, so they have to enact compression. And writing a good poem is very hard, in fact, maybe painful. So let's go with that. If this means this poem, then the lady makes us think very nicely of Dickinson herself, who is now long gone to the world of ceaseless rosemary. But then the words lady's drawer probably can't help bringing to mind, if you know them, the rather thrilling story about Dickinson's own poetic legacy. You may know that she made no attempt to publish most of her poetry, and most of the people who were close to her had no idea that she ever did anything more than put a few verses in a poem now and then. But then the week after her death, in Dickinson's room, her sister Lavinia found, as she wrote, quote, a box locked containing 700 wonderful poems, carefully copied and sewn together in packets. The general rose decay, but this in lady's drawer makes summer when the lady lie in ceaseless rosemary. If we want to say that this means this poem, which poem is that? Are we thinking of the poem that she was writing down some night in 1862 or so? Or are we thinking of this poem that we're reading here and now on this screen? So insofar as the word "this" suggests the labor and even the agony of poetic creation, the gift of screws, that points to the poem as written, the poem as it was appearing under Dickinson's own pen as she wrote the word "this." But when Lady's Drawer makes us think of Dickinson's box of poems, that makes the poem into something expressly meant for a reader who would find it when the lady lie in ceaseless rosemary. That's the vessel sent out into space. It's the message in a bottle, hoping for the chance somewhere, sometime, to make summer. So the word "this" pivots, pointing now to the poem as it's being written, and now to the poem as it's being read. And that giving way, the shifting of reference from Emily Dickinson at her writing desk to ourselves as we read the poem here, in our circumstances, that's the swinging door by which the poem offers an intimacy with its long ago writer. The willingness to read this way is a kind of commitment, since if this is the place the poem is pointing to, then no other place could be meant. In that sense, the poem can have only one target, and it's found it in you. Some people wonder in the Star Trek episode why at a certain point they report that after transmitting to Picard, the probe goes dead. It only needed one person. It found one person. You can't do that. I mean, it would dilute the experience of everybody, you know. Next, you know. that wouldn't work, right? It's not the way we usually think about reading. But it can be, actually. You can feel a great sense of responsibility as you begin to see something moving in the poem that you can just barely see, and you really have to give it all your attention in order to see it. And that's when I think the poem can make summer. You become the poem's reader, you enable it to offer itself fully and in solemn confidence. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Any questions for Will Waters?
I'm not sure how to word this, but why do you think it's make summer? Why not make spring? Like, why not rebirth? What does summer do? Is summer like the ripening of fruit? Like, what is that? The ripening of life? Sorry.
I have to say, this is sort of a dumb thing, but I've never asked myself that question because I am a summer person. Summer is what I want. I don't want spring. I don't want fall or winter. I want summer. It's fulfillment. I mean, I think, that's when roses are at their peak, right?
That's when they're wrong. Whereas it's like spring, it's like when they're just take the sun.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
make summer. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I'll think about it, though, actually. As I say, I think I've taken it for granted because of my own predilections, which is maybe not.
Sorry about that.
No, that's great.
Oh. Hi.
Hi.
I was thinking in terms of sending the probe out in Star Trek and the Emily Dickinson's poems in the box. Maybe it was like, I think what I was interpreting was not so much like a feeling of, and I'm not saying this is what you were saying, but like this desperate message to somebody else to see it, but maybe sending out the message for the sake of sending it out, for the sake of Emily Dickinson knowing that she sent something out, regardless of if somebody ever went into her room or if somebody did. There is physical proof of her feelings and her existence, even if nobody ever sees it again.
Yeah. So there's another poem whose first stanza is quite famous, Dickinson's, "This is my letter to the world that never wrote to me. My message is committed to hands I cannot see," right? So she can't see. She doesn't know if those hands are there, but they might be your hands reading her book, And it's commitment. She uses the word committed, right? She just committed it to the darkness. So I think you're absolutely right. I think not being absolutely sure. I mean, that's why, in my mind, it's not egotism. It's not like, look at me, I've got poems that will, take you over and make summer. Who knows, She really didn't know exactly what was going to happen. I think she had an intuition. If you read her letters, she had an intuition. There's another letter of hers that says, "If fame belonged to me, I could not avoid it," right? But then that didn't mean that she made any effort to get anything published or, and she's right. She couldn't avoid it, actually, right? She's one of the most famous poets in English.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Maybe, I don't know if there's one more or we could stop there. Yeah.
I live in America more than not so much several decades, but one of the best difficulty that I have is understanding poem and understanding comedy in TV. And so when you actually just show this poem, and I was, what is that? I couldn't understand the whole deep meaning of what you just explained. But once you start to explain, it's a new cultural experience that I could actually observe a lot. Thank you.
So I just would like to say thank you very much for that comment. So I teach non-English literatures mostly, right? I mean, I wanted to use an English poem tonight, and I do teach comparative literature. But I actually think that the non-native speaker has a tremendous advantage, actually, in reading literature, and especially poetry. Because you look at the words, you look hard at the words when it's not your native language. you see all kinds of things that people don't usually see because it's their native language and they don't pay very close attention. And with a poet like Dickinson, you want to see everything that's going on in these words. You want to see the pressed in expressed. You definitely want to be thinking about essence when you look at essential and not just think it means important and stop thinking, right? And other Dickinson's poems would give you lots of examples of things where you really, the harder you're looking at the words, as a non-native speaker would have to do, the more you get. So I actually think that non-native speakers have a privileged position as poetry interpreters.
Wow, so I have this privilege of eyes now looking at this poem, and also English is not my first language, and I'm just thinking, in terms of grammar, that's wrong. And you know, there are several.
So is everybody else, though, right? I mean, yeah.
So why it's suns, not sun?
Well, because I think summer involves many suns, right? Many days of sunlight, right? So that one makes sense to me. It's the sequence of the summer suns makes the rose grow. One day of sunlight isn't going to do it, but many suns, suns standing for days of sunlight, maybe something like that. Thank you very much.